Noah leaned toward me just as the organist began to test the lower keys. "Your dad buried 2004. 5 words. They did not sound dramatic. He didn't whisper them with urgency. He said them the way someone mentions a delayed flight. Practical, measured. The courtyard outside St. Luke's Church was filling slowly. Charleston lights spilled across the stone steps in pale gold. The air carried salt from the harbor and the faint sweetness of gardenias arranged along the railings. Guests were greeting each other in careful tones, linen suits, controlled smiles, phones already raised discreetly. I did not react. I kept my eyes on the church doors. "Say that again," I told him. Noah swallowed, but he did not repeat it. Instead, he adjusted his cuff as if he had only commented on the weather. "Marcus Hale is moving forward," he said. "He's filing for release of sealed testimony. Your father's name is in it." I looked at him then. Noah had known me since college. He understood the difference between my silence and my restraint. He also knew when to stop speaking. "Is it confirmed?" I asked. "Yes." The bells began to ring overhead. Slow, deliberate. Inside, white wooden chairs had been arranged in tight rows. The aisle was narrow. St. Luke's had never been grand, but today it felt staged. Cameras were positioned near the back wall, angled carefully to capture the front pew. My father believed in documentation when it served him. In our house, that year existed like a sealed room. No one entered it. No one described what was inside. If it was mentioned at all, it was called "that accident." A fire at the Charleston shipyard, an unfortunate loss, insurance complications, regulatory confusion. I was 10 years old when it happened. I remember waking to the smell of smoke drifting through the neighborhood. I remember my father leaving the house before dawn in a press suit. I remember my mother watching the news in silence, her hands wrapped around a mug she did not drink from. I remember being told not to ask questions. "Some things are complicated," my father had said. "You're too young to understand." He said it kindly. That was his method. Kindness without access. Now he stood near the altar, speaking to a local councilman, his posture open and confident. He had already transitioned from state office to national ambition. The Senate hearing next month was meant to be procedural, symbolic, a reaffirmation of integrity. I walked down the aisle alone. The sound of my heels against the wooden floor was soft, controlled. The photographer shifted to capture the angle of my approach. I felt the lens before I saw it. My father noticed me and smiled. He always smiled first. "You look composed," he said quietly as I reached him. "I am." He adjusted his cufflinks, silver, understated. "After today, everything will settle." His voice carried certainty. It always had. "Did you bury 2004? I asked. There was no tremor in my tone. He did not flinch. He did not hesitate. What an odd thing to say. The minister stepped forward. The organ rose into a fuller chord. My father placed his hand at the small of my back, guiding me toward the front row. It looked affectionate from a distance, protective, patriarchal. "You shouldn't listen to speculation," he murmured. "Journalists build careers on shadows." I allowed him to guide me. I sat in the first pew. Across the aisle, Noah had taken his place. His gaze met mine briefly. He did not look afraid. He looked prepared. The ceremony began. Words about service, about faith, about duty to community. My father had built his career on those pillars: discipline, accountability, honor, honor. 2 weeks earlier, I had read Marcus Hale's article in my apartment at midnight. The headline had been restrained. "Shipyard fire, unanswered questions remain." He cited missing internal reports, a maintenance log that had been altered, a witness who had given an initial statement, then disappeared from subsequent documentation. There was a footnote. "Present during early review discussions, Representative Thomas Collins." My father, not accused, mentioned. I had stared at that line for a long time. The minister asked everyone to bow their heads. I did not. I watched my father instead. He closed his eyes, expression composed. He knew where the cameras were. He knew which profile was stronger. When the ceremony ended, applause filled the small chapel, controlled, respectful, bright enough for broadcast. Outside, reporters waited beyond the iron gate. Charleston was accustomed to spectacle, but it preferred its scandals contained. Senator Collins, any comment on the reopened shipyard investigation? The question cut cleanly through the murmurs. My father did not hesitate. I have always supported transparency, he said evenly. That fire was a tragedy. The investigation concluded years ago. We trust the institutions in place. He placed his hand on my shoulder. My family stands united. Flashbulbs burst. I felt the weight of his hand through the fabric of my dress, firm, claiming, united. I kept my expression neutral. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment instead of attending the reception. The sunlight had shifted. Charleston light is softer in late afternoon, almost forgiving. I unlocked my door and went directly to the hallway closet. On the top shelf were 3 storage boxes that had belonged to my mother. She had died 5 years ago, cancer, quiet, controlled. Before she passed, she had asked me to keep her papers safe. "You're the organized one," she had said. It was the only time anyone in my family had described me that way without irony. I carried the boxes to the dining table. Dust lifted into the air as I opened the first one. Insurance forms, old photographs, holiday cards. The second box contained correspondence from 2003 and 2004. I paused before opening it. I remembered one specific night in 2004. My father had come home after midnight. His suit smelled like smoke and harbor water. I had been sitting on the stairs. I was supposed to be asleep. He had seen me. "Avery," he said softly, "go back to bed." "Was it bad?" I had asked. "It's under control," he replied. He had not answered the question I asked. Now at my table, I unfolded the first letter in my mother's box. It was dated 3 weeks after the fire. The handwriting was hers. "Thomas says this will pass. He says the reports are being reviewed. I don't like the way they're handling the witness. He says I shouldn't worry." I read that sentence twice. They're handling the witness. There were more letters, notes to herself, references to a meeting at the shipyard, a name circled twice in blue ink, a copy of a maintenance report with a margin note. Original version? My breathing remained steady. I did not rush. I photographed each page. I organized them chronologically. Marcus Hale had reopened the case publicly. The Senate hearing next month would not be ceremonial anymore. If my father's name was in sealed testimony, it would surface. And when it did, the cameras would not be positioned for his benefit. At 7:14 p.m., my phone vibrated. It was my father. "Where are you?" he asked when I answered. "At home." "You should have come to the reception." I had something to review. A pause. "You're overthinking this," he said calmly. "Marcus Hale is looking for attention. 2004 was an accident." "I found Mom's letters," I said. Silence. Then carefully. "Your mother worried about everything. She wrote about a witness." Another pause. Longer. "Avery," he said, voice lower now. "Some things were handled appropriately at the time. It was a different climate. Decisions were made to prevent unnecessary damage." "To whom?" I asked. "To everyone." I closed my eyes briefly. "I'm not your enemy," he added. I did not answer that. After we ended the call, I returned to the letters. One envelope contained a photocopy of a memo stamped "Confidential." The header referenced an internal review committee. My father's initials appeared at the bottom, not as an author, as present. I placed the memo flat on the table and smoothed the crease. In 2004, I was 10 years old. In 2026, I was 32. I was no longer too young to understand. By the time the moon rose over the harbor, I had scanned every document. I did not cry. I did not call Noah. I opened my laptop and drafted a single email to Marcus Hale. Subject line, 2004, additional materials. I did not send it yet. Not tonight. Timing matters. Before I went to bed, I stood by the window and looked toward the direction of the old shipyard. It had been renovated since the fire. New steel, new signage. A public memory rewritten by architecture. Buried things do not disappear. They settle. And when someone begins to dig, you have to decide whether you will cover the ground again or step aside. Would you open the sealed year if it meant losing your name? The Senate hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. By Monday night, my father had called 3 times. I did not answer the first 2. On the third, I let it ring once longer than necessary before picking up. "You've been speaking to people," he said without greeting. "I've been reading," I replied. "Avery." His tone carried that familiar blend of patience and warning. "You don't understand how these processes work." "I understand documentation," I said. "I understand timelines." Silence. "You sent something to Marcus Hale." It was not a question. "I haven't sent anything," I said truthfully. "Not yet." He exhaled slowly. "You are putting yourself in the middle of something that was resolved 22 years ago." "Was it?" Another pause. "Officially," he said. That word again. Officially. After we ended the call, I opened my laptop and reread the email draft. I attached the scanned letters. The memo. The margin notes in my mother's handwriting. I did not write commentary. I did not explain context. I pressed send. The response came less than an hour later. Received. This confirms what we suspected. We will request formal testimony release. Are you willing to cooperate if called? I stared at the message. Willing. The word carried weight. It meant visibility. It meant public alignment. It meant stepping out of the protection my last name had always provided. Yes, I typed. The next morning, the hearing room in Washington was colder than I expected. The ceiling lights were harsh. Cameras lined the back wall. A small brass plaque identified each senator. My father's name sat centered at the long, curved table. Thomas Collins. He wore a charcoal suit, neutral tie, American flag pin placed precisely on his lapel. He greeted colleagues with measured warmth, hands clasped, eye contact sustained just long enough. I took a seat behind the witness section. No one stopped me. Marcus Hale sat 3 rows away, reviewing a folder. He did not look at me. The session began with procedural statements. The chairperson outlined the purpose. Review of archived investigations related to the 2004 Charleston shipyard fire. Questions about missing records. Discrepancies in reported maintenance logs. My father leaned toward his microphone. That incident was thoroughly examined at the time, he said. The findings were clear. It was a tragic industrial accident. A senator to his left adjusted his glasses. Were you present at any preliminary review meetings before the official report was finalized? I attended one briefing, my father replied, as a state representative concerned about economic impact. Did you review internal witness statements? No. Marcus Hale stood when called. He did not raise his voice. We have evidence, he said calmly, that an initial witness identified concerns about deliberate bypassing of safety systems. That statement was later retracted. The witness relocated shortly afterward. We have internal correspondence suggesting pressure to categorize the fire as accidental. The room shifted subtly. My father remained still. That is speculation, he said. Marcus placed a document on the overhead projector. It was the memo I had found. The camera zoomed in on the lower corner. My father's initials. Present. The chairperson looked toward him. Senator Collins, can you explain this? He glanced at the screen. For the first time, he did not immediately respond. I attended a discussion, he said evenly. I did not author that document. Were you aware of any effort to discourage further investigation? No. Marcus spoke again. We have additional material from a private source confirming that concerns were raised internally about suppressing testimony. The phrase hung in the air, private source. My father's gaze moved slowly across the room. It stopped on me. Recognition, not surprise. He understood immediately. The chairperson followed his line of sight. "Is the source present?" she asked. Marcus nodded once. "I am." My voice sounded distant but steady. Every camera turned. My father did not look away. The chairperson gestured for me to approach. I walked to the witness table. My heels echoed against the polished floor. Each step measured, deliberate. I did not look at my father as I sat. "Please state your name for the record." "Avery Collins." A faint murmur moved through the gallery. "And your relation to Senator Collins?" "He is my father." The chairperson folded her hands. "You have submitted documents to the committee?" "Yes." "Where did you obtain them?" "They were among my late mother's personal papers." My father's jaw tightened. "What do these documents indicate?" "That internal concerns were raised about witness handling," I said, "and that there was discussion of limiting public disclosure." "Did Senator Collins participate in those discussions?" "He was present." The question lingered. "Did he support suppression of information?" I paused. I remembered the smell of smoke in 2004, the way my father had told me not to ask questions, the way my mother had written, "He says this will pass." "He did not object," I said. Silence settled across the chamber. My father leaned toward his microphone. "She is mistaken," he said. "My daughter was a child in 2004. She does not understand the context." The chairperson raised a hand. "Senator, you will have the opportunity to respond. Please allow the witness to finish." I continued. "The official report categorized the fire as accidental. The document suggests there was uncertainty. That uncertainty was not disclosed." "Why are you bringing this forward now?" the chairperson asked. "Because it was not resolved," I said. "It was buried." The word landed. My father closed his eyes briefly. Then he spoke, voice controlled. "She's not my daughter." The room went still. Cameras clicked in rapid succession. For a moment I felt nothing. No heat, no humiliation, only clarity. He had chosen distance, not just from me, from the truth. The chairperson stared at him. "Senator Collins, are you formally disavowing a witness to avoid conflict of interest?" He hesitated. Then, "I meant that she is speaking independently. She does not represent me." But the damage had already settled. The phrase would circulate within minutes. "She's not my daughter." Marcus did not look at me. He did not need to. The hearing adjourned early. Outside, reporters surged forward. "Miss Collins, how do you respond to your father's statement?" I adjusted my coat. "I'm here as a citizen," I said, "not as a daughter." "Do you believe your father participated in a cover-up?" "I believe he chose silence when transparency was required." Behind me, my father exited through a side door. He did not look back. By evening, the clip had aired on every major network. Analysis panels debated loyalty, ambition, political damage control. At 9:37 p.m., my phone vibrated again. A message from my father. "You've made your choice." I read it once. I did not respond. That night, alone in my apartment, I removed my last name from my social media accounts. Not dramatically, not publicly, quietly. Collins no longer appeared beside Avery. In 2004, I was told I was too young to understand. In 2026, I understood exactly what silence costs. Would you have stayed quiet to protect your name? Tell me, and I will continue. The day after the hearing, my name moved without me. It appeared in headlines, in captions beneath still frames of my face, in opinion columns that used words like betrayal and courage in the same paragraph. By noon, my father's office had issued a statement. Senator Collins unequivocally denies any wrongdoing. He regrets that a family member has been misled by incomplete archival materials. A family member. The language was precise. At 2:15 p.m., a black sedan parked outside my apartment building. I watched it from the window for a full minute before the doorbell rang. I opened the door. My father stood in the hallway alone. No staff, no cameras. He looked older than he had the day before. "You shouldn't have done that publicly," he said. "You shouldn't have done it privately," I replied. He stepped inside without asking. The apartment felt smaller with him in it. "You don't understand the pressure we were under in 2004, he said. "The shipyard employed hundreds of people. A criminal investigation would have collapsed the local economy. So you collapsed the truth instead." His jaw tightened. It was handled responsibly. A witness disappeared. He relocated. After giving a statement that contradicted the official report, he walked to the window and looked out toward the harbor. "You think politics is clean?" he asked. "You think investigations are pure? Every decision has collateral." "I was collateral," I said. He turned. "This isn't about you. It is now." Silence expanded between us. He studied my face as if searching for something familiar. "You've aligned yourself with a journalist who wants my career," he said. "I aligned myself with documents." He exhaled sharply. "You've put me in a position where I have to respond." "You already did." His expression shifted briefly. That comment was taken out of context. It wasn't. He did not argue that. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. "Withdraw your cooperation," he said. "Issue a clarification. State that you misinterpreted the material." I did not touch the paper. "And if I don't?" "You will lose more than a last name." There it was. Not loud, not threatening in tone, just factual. "I already have," I said. He held my gaze for a long moment. "I built everything I have from nothing," he said quietly. "You think that came without compromise?" "I think compromise has limits. You're naive." "No," I said. "I was." He looked at the boxes of my mother's papers stacked against the wall. "She worried too much," he murmured. "She wrote that she didn't like how the witness was handled. She didn't understand. She understood enough to document it." His shoulders lowered slightly. "For 22 years, he said, I protected this family from instability." "You protected yourself." He did not deny it. Instead, he picked up the folded paper and slipped it back into his pocket. "If you continue," he said, "this will not stay contained." "I know." He moved toward the door. "Avery," he said, without turning, "you don't win by burning your own house." "I'm not burning it," I replied. "I'm opening the windows." He left without another word. That evening, Marcus called. "They've agreed to reopen the inquiry formally," he said. "Subpoenas will be issued." "For my father?" "For several officials present at the 2004 review." I sat down slowly. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, "it becomes procedural, slow, public." I thought of my father's expression in the hearing room, the moment before he spoke, the calculation. "Will he resign?" I asked. "Not immediately," Marcus said, "but reputations don't collapse overnight. They erode." After the call, I opened my laptop again. Messages flooded my inbox, some supportive, some accusing. "Family should stay loyal. You're brave. You've destroyed him." I did not respond to any of them. At 11:02 p.m., a notification appeared from the Senate Ethics Committee, a formal notice of expanded review. My father's name was listed among those required to submit supplemental documentation. The system had begun to move. 2 days later, archived footage from 2004 surfaced. Local news coverage, interviews with workers, a brief clip of a man speaking to a reporter outside the shipyard gate. "I told them the alarms didn't trigger," he said. "I told them it wasn't wiring." The footage cut abruptly. The man's name was partially visible on a lower third graphic. the same name circled in blue ink in my mother's letter. He had relocated 2 weeks later, no forwarding address. Marcus sent me a message. They're trying to locate him. On Friday morning, my father's approval ratings dropped 12 points. By afternoon, 3 colleagues had issued cautious statements emphasizing full transparency. By evening, one withdrew public endorsement. Pressure does not shout, it accumulates. On Sunday, my father held a press conference. He stood at a podium in front of the state capitol. "I have always acted in the best interest of my constituents," he said. "If mistakes were made in 2004, they were procedural, not malicious." Procedural. The word echoed. A reporter asked, "Do you regret distancing yourself from your daughter during the hearing?" He paused. Then, "Emotions were high. I regret any confusion." Not apology, not acknowledgement. Confusion. That night, I packed 2 suitcases. Not in haste, methodically. I canceled my lease. I declined 3 interview requests. When Marcus called again, I answered. "They've found the witness," he said. "He's agreed to testify." I closed my eyes. "Is he safe?" "Yes." The following week, the supplemental hearing was scheduled. I did not attend in person. I watched it on a small screen in a temporary rental across town. The witness spoke calmly. He described raising concerns about safety systems being intentionally bypassed to accelerate production schedules. He described being advised to reconsider his statement. He described relocating under pressure. My father listened without expression. When asked whether he had been aware of these concerns in 2004, he answered carefully, "I was aware that discussions were ongoing." "Did you support limiting the scope of the investigation?" "I supported stabilizing the situation." The chairperson leaned forward. "At the expense of accuracy." He hesitated. That hesitation lasted 3 seconds. Long enough. By evening, calls for his resignation were no longer speculative. They were formal. At 6:40 p.m., my phone vibrated. A short message from him. It didn't have to end this way. I read it once. Then I placed the phone face down on the table. Outside, Charleston traffic moved steadily toward the harbor. The old shipyard cranes stood against the sky, motionless. In 2004, silence was chosen. In 2026, it was no longer available. Would you have stepped forward knowing the cost would be permanent? The resignation came on a Thursday, not at night, not hidden behind a Friday news cycle. At 11:12 a.m., my father stood behind a narrow podium in the same Capitol courtyard where he had celebrated his Senate victory 8 years earlier. The sky was clear. Charleston light has a way of exposing edges. "I have decided to step down," he said, "not because I believe I acted with ill intent, but because public trust requires clarity." Clarity. He did not look tired. He looked contained. "I regret the pain this process has caused my family." That was the only time he used the word family. No mention of me, no mention of 2004. He concluded by thanking his staff. He did not take questions. By noon, the clip had circulated everywhere. By 1:30 p.m., his office had begun packing boxes. By 4 p.m., the Ethics Committee announced a formal censure to accompany the resignation. Findings included failure to advocate for full disclosure and participation in procedural narrowing of investigative scope. Procedural narrowing. A polite phrase for burial. I watched the announcement from a small rental near the water. The television volume was low. I did not need sound. The captions were enough. When the screen cut back to commentary, I turned it off. Silence in the room felt different now, not defensive, not bracing, just still. My phone vibrated once. A text from him. "It's done." No accusation, no demand, just fact. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I opened the last box of my mother's papers. There was one envelope I had not examined closely before. It was thinner than the others. No return address. Inside was a single sheet typed. Thomas says this is necessary. He says the alternative would destroy everything. I asked him what everything means. The sentence ended there. No resolution, no answer. I folded the page carefully and placed it back inside. At 6 p.m., there was a knock on my door. Not the firm knock of my father, a softer one. When I opened it, he was standing there anyway. No security detail, no car idling outside. Just him. "You watched?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded once. "I didn't expect you to." "I've watched everything." He stepped inside. The apartment was sparse now. Half the furniture had already been sold. Suitcases stood near the wall. "You're leaving," he observed. "Yes." "Running?" "No." He moved to the window and looked toward the harbor cranes. "I thought I could contain it," he said quietly. "Back then." "Contain what?" "Damage." I did not ask for specifics. "In 2004, he continued, the shipyard contract was tied to 3 major employers. If criminal charges had been filed immediately, the investors would have pulled out. Hundreds of jobs. And the truth," he inhaled slowly, "would have destabilized everything. So you chose stability. I chose survival." "For who?" He did not answer. We stood there without speaking for a full minute. "You think I don't understand systems," he said finally. "I built my life navigating them." "I understand systems," I replied. "That's why I stepped outside of yours." His mouth tightened slightly. "You could have come to me first." "I did." "When?" "At the church." He looked at me then. For a second, something like memory crossed his face. "You asked an accusation," he said. "I asked a question." He did not argue further. "Your name," he said. "You removed it." "Yes." "That wasn't necessary." "It was." "Collins isn't just me." "It was." He absorbed that. "You'll find," he said carefully, "that starting over isn't as clean as it sounds." "I don't need it to be clean." He nodded faintly. "Your mother believed in loyalty." "She believed in documentation." A flicker. "You always were precise," he murmured. He reached into his coat pocket and removed something small, a folded clipping. He placed it on the table. It was an article from 2004, a photo of the burning shipyard, a quote attributed to him, "We will ensure transparency and accountability." He looked at it briefly. "I meant that," he said. "I know." He straightened. "What happens to us now?" he asked. The question was quiet. There was no performance in it. "There isn't an us," I said. "Not in the way there was." He nodded once. "That's final?" "Yes." He did not argue. He walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth," he said without turning, "you were never collateral." I did not answer that. After he left, the room felt larger. The next week, the formal report was published. It concluded that the 2004 investigation had been prematurely closed under political pressure, that internal dissent had been minimized, that procedural decisions prioritized economic optics over complete factual disclosure. My father's role was described as complicit through omission, no criminal charges, but permanent record. I forwarded the report to Marcus with a brief note. "Thank you." He replied, "You changed the trajectory." I did not correct him. I did not change the trajectory. I removed a cover. 3 days later, I signed a lease in another city. No press, no announcement, just a new address. On my final evening in Charleston, I walked alone near the renovated shipyard. The crane stood silent against the darkening sky. Steel reflected the last of the light. Tourists moved along the boardwalk without looking toward the water. I stood where the old fence line used to be. In 2004, I had been 10 years old, told I was too young to understand. In 2026, I understood enough to leave. I lost the family name. I lost the proximity to power. I did not lose myself. Truth did not repair the past. It did not restore anything that had already been altered, but it removed the weight of silence. Sometimes that is enough. If you were standing where I stood, would you have chosen the same? Tell me what you think. And if you want to follow stories like this, quiet, deliberate, and unfinished, stay with me.